What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in this video, I'm going to discuss Rogue's prospects for the playoffs, which include winning the Spring Championship. So we've gone through all of the other teams in the LEC. We've talked about some of their matchups with Rogue, specifically Fnatic against Rogue. In this video, I want to take a look at Malrong specifically because I think that their playoff hopes really depend on how good Malrong can be, and it's a difficult question to answer because through most of Malrong's career, he was not on good teams, and that kind of obscures both his champion pool and also his win rates on champions, because before 2020, for those of you who didn't really pay attention to professional League of Legends before 2020, most junglers were not carry players. Most junglers were very much utility players. There were some that would snowball and get out of control, but the types of champions that you were playing were like Trundle, Sejuani, Lee Sin, Elise, Rumble, and it's like a lot of those. Well, I guess Rumble was more like 2018, 2019. Or Olaf, just a lot of more like snowball style champions, which is one of the reasons why Malrong has a lot of champions at his disposal, similar to like Jarvan and stuff like that, is because they've been around for so long, the champions and the player Malrong. So I don't think it's fair to go through their champion history from like 2017, 2018, 2019, because the most important thing in my mind is that a team as good as Damwon was willing to not only have Malrong on their team, but when they started having problems with Ghost as an AD carry, and he kind of subbed out for a while, they brought in Malrong. He was starting jungler, and then they moved everybody else around, and it miraculously worked. And it's probably a lot easier to do something like that because then you still have Showmaker, you still have Canyon, you have very talented players. But he was taking on an important role. He went 4-1 on Rumble, 1-1 on Diana, 1-1 on Volibear, 1-0 on Xin Zhao. So, Rumble's not really a champion that we see at all anymore. But we do see the 200 CS per game, which is more similar to what players like Elyoya are doing, where they take on a lot of the additional resources. We haven't really seen that as much in 2022. So I am pretty positive. Pretty positive, fairly certain, however you want to say it, that Malrong doesn't need to play like this. Malrong has it on his highest CS per game is Lee Sin at 160. There are a lot of players out there that are up in the 190s and 200s as junglers because they're being more selfish. I guess maybe selfish isn't the right word, because Malrong plays a different style of selfishness where he's going out and he's trying to gank instead of farm, which is, I guess maybe greedy is a better word than selfish. But when he's successful, and he is successful a decent amount of the time, he's getting his laners ahead, putting the other laners behind, and staying on track with the enemy jungler in terms of scaling and gold. So when we look at matchups in the playoffs, I think that it would be kind of nearsighted or not seeing the entire picture to say that Malrong on these style of champions isn't going to be able to effect gigantic amounts of influence on the game, because ganking a lot in the early game is probably going to be more difficult to do in the playoffs, which is why I think that Malrong will transition into more of a CS farming style jungle champion pool that is going to allow him to have more influence in the later stages of the game as a damage dealer instead of just an engage option for his team. We know he's a playmaker. We know he's smart at reading the map and matching what the enemy jungler is doing, reading where the enemy jungler is going to go. And that's part of the reason why Rogue has been a very successful team so far this year. It helps when you have good players around you. I think that Odoamne is a good top laner, not a great top laner. He's in the second tier of top laners that are left in playoffs. I think that Broken Blade, Hyrule, and Alfari are all better than him in terms of being able to more consistently play the aggressive side of a matchup and like execute correctly. Which isn't to take anything away from Odoamne. I know, like we all know that he can do that as well. It's just I don't trust it coming from him as much as I do from someone else. In the jungle, I think that Malrong is the best jungler left in playoffs. At worst, he's tied for first. I still believe in Selfmade because his carry, the level that he can carry, is kind of unmatched by other junglers that are in playoffs right now. You could argue that El Yoya, when he has a lot of resources, is like on that level as well. But his team just isn't as strong right now. In the mid lane, Larson is one of the best mid laners remaining. Comp is in the second tier of AD carries remaining. I think that Upset is in a tier by himself, and then it's kind of everybody else. The significance of AD carries will be tested with the meta if it's actually going to shift. I kind of feel like it's going to shift away from Aphelios and Jinx towards utility AD carries because there are continuous buffs being applied to utility AD carries, and teams are becoming better at pick banning against Jinx and Aphelios. They still kind of like suck at it in general because I think that picking Aphelios into Jinx, you're kind of just asking to lose at this point because of the range disadvantage. But that's not really what this video is about. And then Trimby is in the second tier of supports behind Hylissang and Mickey. So obviously I have a high opinion of all the players on their team. That should make Malrong's job a lot more simple. When we take a look at their theoretical matchups against other teams in playoffs, I think that let's go to... I have it all kind of broken out. Rogue against... Let me just maximize this. So... Oh, whoops. Rogue against Fnatic. Or let's go from the bottom to the top. Rogue against Vitality. So I think that Rogue and Vitality are closer than public perception. I think that Rogue would win about 60% of the time. Between 55 to 60% of the time, and that Vitality would win between 40 to 45% of the time. I do think that Rogue should be the favorite, and I do think that I would ultimately pick Vitality because if we get to the point where Vitality is facing off against Rogue, we're either going to see a Rogue loss or we're going to see a big we will see a big Vitality win streak if they play against each other. It just the question is, will we see this matchup in semifinals or finals? Because that's kind of just how it would have to happen. Rogue against XL, I don't expect these two teams to have to play against each other, but if they did, I think that Rogue wins about 80% of the time to XL's 20% of the time. Rogue against G2. So I think that Rogue against G2 is similar to Rogue against Misfits. I think it's 70-30. I just think that Rogue is more talented than both of those teams. But let's talk about how those matchups could theoretically go. So we go Rogue, Misfits, and G2. So Odoamne against Broken Blade. I do think that there's a slight edge towards G2 in the draft and in terms of talent in the top lane. Same thing with Misfits. It's going to be very difficult to draft in such a way that you beat Rogue because you beat them in top lane. I think that they understand their team enough to not put Odoamne into very bad positions. But again, we'll have to see how drafts play out. And live betting during playoffs will be probably very lucrative if you're waiting until drafts are done. Malrong against Jankos, I think Malrong is better. Malrong against Zlatan, I think that Malrong is better. I think that Jankos is somewhat of a liability from the draft perspective at this point. He is very diverse in the champions that he can play, but he's not very diverse in executing to like an elite level, which I think you'll need to beat Malrong in playoffs. And then with Zlatan, I think that Zlatan ban Lee Sin, force him onto something else, and you're at an advantage immediately. It's not that I think he cannot play anything else. It's just he is by far the best on Lee Sin for himself. He's not better at Lee Sin than other players. That's not what I'm saying. Although he might be, but why give a player their best champion? You just shouldn't do it if you can avoid it. And by doing that, you create so much additional stress on Misfits as a team, because without their jungler functioning the right way in the early game, it'll be much more difficult for them to hit like their kind of like break points that they're used to reaching during a game when they're playing against a lesser opponent. Larson against Vetio. I think that Vetio has the chance to be as good, if not better, than Larson. We've seen his peaks are at the same level as Larson's peaks, which is kind of an important thing to talk about, because I could see Vetio coming in and playing the aggressive side of matchups in the mid lane and actually beating Larson. I just don't think that it's likely to happen. I don't think that it's likely they're going to draft that way. They probably should. Like, I'd say if I'm Misfits, I'm just going to go for it and play like a bunch of aggressive champions and let my young potential superstar play like a superstar. But we'll see how that actually happens. And that'll tell us a decent amount about, how Misfits views Vetio, and also how much influence does Vetio have over draft himself. And then in the bot lane, Comp and Trimby against Neon and Mursa. I think that Comp and Trimby are straight up better. Neon and Mursa are the worst or second worst bot lane left, I think. Some people want to give Neon credit for this split. I'm pretty sure Neon has gotten Jinx more than any other player in the LEC, and that's just an unfair advantage. I think you can kind of you don't even need to throw away those statistics, just tone them down. Imagine him not getting Jinx like 10 games, and then think about what they would look like. Or think about their turnover luck. They've had so many games just completely thrown away by the team that was in a winning position with like over a 5,000 gold lead. People just shouldn't get that lucky consistently. And obviously you need to convert, like you need to take advantage of that opportunity when it presents itself, but you have to be cognizant of those kinds of things. Otherwise you're going to have an unrealistic expectation for Misfits that they're just not going to be able to reach. Larson against Caps. Caps is better. He hasn't played better than Larson this split overall, but Caps is just a better player. When we look back at this time period, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's not even going to be a question of who the better player was between Caps and Larson. And then Flocket and Targamas against Comp and Trimby. I think Flocket and Targamas are like a weak bot lane. Flocket has a lot of big... actually, no. I do think that they're weak. I was about to say that he had a lot of positioning mistakes, but that's how I feel about Unforgiven. So Flocket and Targamas, I just don't think that they're like true carry players. I don't think that Flocket has shown that he can put the team on his back consistently, and he's not really been asked to. And the one out that I see for teams like G2 to do well in playoffs is if it does shift fast into a utility AD carry meta where you're banning, even if the hyper carry champions are still very strong, if you're banning out those champions and then playing utility AD carries instead, forcing Comp onto a utility AD carry, there could be spots where Rogue doesn't have enough damage from jungle and AD carry because they're playing something like Jarvan plus a utility AD carry. Then you need like a true carry in the top lane or in the mid lane or both, and teams can kind of draft themselves into a corner like that. So that's one thing that Rogue should definitely watch out for. And then Rogue against Vitality, we should talk about that more specifically, or directly, I guess. Alfari is better than Odoamne. Malrong and Selfmade are... either Malrong is better or they're the same. I don't think that Selfmade is really better than Malrong. I do think that Selfmade has the potential to be a better carry player than Malrong, but that's not necessarily going to help because that is the more difficult side of the matchup in general. Playing more volatile champions and relying on like staying on task and hitting the correct gold threshold at the right time so that you're not far behind and the other team is getting too tanky. Like that's the real concern for Vitality and Selfmade. They have messed that up a lot this season so far. Like they'll play an early game team composition and then still lose the early game and then still fight all the time, which I don't have a problem with you fighting all the time from a losing position because the chance of you winning are so low already. Perks against Larson. I think that Perks I don't know what their head-to-head record is. I would assume that Perks is somewhat dominant against Larson, but I'm just talking out of that would be interesting. If anybody knows what that actually is, please DM me or put it in the comments. And then Comp and Trimby against Carzzy and Labrov. Again, this is a spot where I could see Vitality playing more aggressive in the early game, letting Carzzy be somewhat of a playmaker, giving a lot of additional resources to the bot lane, bringing Selfmade, Perks, and Alfari all down to the bot lane to try to get ahead of Comp. I don't think that Comp is going to be able to carry from a losing position consistently, and we know that Carzzy is a good playmaking AD carry when he has a lead and when he's playing well, which he's been okay this split, but he's not been great. And the lethality Xayah, just kind of has to stop at this point. I don't think that it will, but I wish it would. I don't think Kalista is really playable right now. I know Lucian just got buffed recently. I don't remember what patch they're playing on. Let's see, spring playoffs. Patch. All right, I don't know what patch they're playing on. But that's that. Okay, and then let's go to Fnatic. I kind of mentioned this in the Rogue versus Fnatic, or in the Fnatic video. Wonder against Odoamne. I think that both players are good players. It's going to come down to the draft. In the jungle, I think that Malrong is better than Razork straight up. I think that Razork, the reason why he's looked good is because he's been on a team that's been consistently winning, and his team consistently wins because they're more talented than almost every team in the LEC. Larson against Humanoid, I think Larson is just the better player, and I think that stylistically Larson matches up well against Humanoid. In their games this split, Rogue won the first game because they took away Twisted Fate, and they lost the second game because they gave Humanoid Twisted Fate. It's not necessarily like that's why they lost, but that's what happened in their win and loss. Like, that's the history of what has happened. So I think they'll probably avoid doing that again. And then Comp and Trimby against Upset and Hillsong. And again, like I said in the last video, Upset and Hillsong definitely have a real advantage in the bot lane. They are the better players in AD carry and in support. That will most likely be the way that Fnatic attacks Rogue. Like, you're not going to attack Odoamne most of the time, I would think. You probably could try to attack Malrong. I don't know if you'll be successful doing it, but there have been some weaknesses in his early game when teams like fully committed to kind of getting him off schedule. And you're not going to attack Larson because in general his champion pool is just good against being camped. So that's basically it. I think that Rogue is probably the team that I think is most likely to win. I have it at Rogue 22.26%, Fnatic 19.74%, and then Vitality around like 7%. I like Vitality more than 7%. I like Fnatic less than 20%. I like Rogue right around the 22%, probably a little more. But those are the three teams I think most people would agree have the best chances of winning. And those lines that I mentioned were the starting points that I came to based off of the tier list that I have and based off of the money lines that we've seen so far for the playoffs. So that's basically it. So I think that Rogue will most likely win the championship. But if they lose, it would mean that we get some great League of Legends. And I do think that we will have very entertaining matches in the LEC. I think that the power level of the teams in the LEC is closer than the power level of the teams that will be facing off in the LCK or the LCS specifically. The LPL is going to be this might be like the most fun playoffs to watch ever in the LPL because like a lot of the teams are just like very close in terms of skill. But that's it. So again, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, share it. If you have any differences of opinion with me, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I reply to every single comment, whether or not it's positive or negative. My response will change depending on how you talk to me. But I will respond. Or I'll like it or heart it. But yeah, if you want to support the channel, check out thrivefantasy.com. Use the promo code Pikel. Feel free to check out Patreon. I have a Discord. Patreon's $10 a month. Once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm getting rid of the paywall to Patreon and Discord. So help me hit that threshold. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.